Hello again, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Inside Lowell Daily Pulse, the show where we take a look at Lowell and the world around it. We like to keep our finger on the pulse of it, as I like to say. I'm your host, 𝐃𝐚𝐢𝐥𝐲 𝐏𝐿𝐿, joined here in the WellPoint studios this morning by our special guest, none other than the Superintendent of Lowell Schools, a name that has been on the lips of many folks over the last couple of weeks, for better or for worse.
Right.
But we're so excited that we made this schedule, like 2 months ago, where we mapped out the rest of the school year and your appearances here to get them on the calendar. And, you know, timing is everything in life, Superintendent Liam Skinner.
Well, I could have called in sick today, huh?
Oh, that would have been too obvious. You don't want to do that.
I'm delighted to be here. I appreciate what happens on the podcast. I believe that local media being really important to inform our community. And I'm delighted to be part of that. So I'd like the opportunity to talk with you, and happy to be here today.
Well, I'm excited you're here because I do want to inform the community, and I've spent the last 2 days for certain, but certainly over the last couple of weeks, giving my information as I see it to the community about this battle, the difference of agreement between what the city wants to give the schools for a budget and what the schools are asking for. And it's only fair to give you a chance to explain what you're asking for. There's a lot of talk out there. They're asking for this, they're asking for that. Here's a chance for you to kind of tell us what you're asking for, and also to give your viewpoint, which I know you've done at the council meeting and at the school committee. But I do have some questions after hearing you speak. So
Sure.
Thank you for being here. We'll get right to the conversation with Superintendent Skinner. First, let me just thank my Daily Pulse sponsors, if I may. Ray Booten, he is a licensed realtor in Massachusetts and New Hampshire. He is a certified appraiser in both of those states as well. So if you're looking to buy or sell a home, a business, or a commercial property, there's only one call to make, and that is to Real Estate Ray Booten. Find him online, realestaterayBooten.com. Thanks as well to our friends at WellPoint. WellPoint, the only health plan offering healthcare benefits exclusively to Massachusetts GIC members. At WellPoint, your whole health is their whole point. Thank you to WellPoint. Thank you to Ray Booten. We got a few other sponsors we want to thank as well. We'll do that in a few minutes, but let's get right down to it. First, just kind of your take over these last several weeks on the school budget, what you're asking for, what the city has proposed, and what are the latest? Where are the discussions right now with the city on bridging what we all believe is about a $4 million gap?
Okay, Ted, thank you. Big question, right? So, there's a number of ways of answering it. I could say it'd be very easy to ask for lots more money, right? But you have to be also realistic and practical, and consider the context that we're in an urban district and so on. But just bring it down to local and more recent events. The school department depends on funding each fiscal year. The vast majority of that funding comes from the state. It's Chapter 70 money. In recent years, it's been supplemented by what's called Student Opportunity Act money. We can explain these things if it's helpful. And then another source of revenue is from the city. The city contributes a certain amount of cash. The cash is a proportion of the city's obligations to the schools. The state sets a number as your obligation, and the city meets that obligation year on year by giving us a certain amount of cash and by providing certain services for schools. They heat the schools, they put the electricity into the lights, they do repairs and so forth. That's called, that aspect of it is called maintenance of effort. So some of the city's obligation to schools is met through maintenance of effort, and some of it is met through cash. So this year, the city's giving us a significant reduction in the cash. And so there's two significant issues with that. One is that it was unanticipated, and so it wasn't planned for, and so now you make significant cutbacks that you were didn't anticipating having to make. And the second is that there's a very strong argument, I believe, for additional funding from the city to schools, not less.
Okay. It's been described as you and the city manager have been communicating. You've been talking. You have been described as friends, and that you will be able to, everyone's optimistic. Everyone's hopeful that you will be able to work things out. I've surmised here on the Daily Pulse that you guys have probably already worked something out that will be amenable to both sides. Is that accurate? Are you and the city manager still friends after being, $4 million apart, and your fiery speech on the council floor and some of the rebuttals from certain members of the council?
So let me address that, and I'll tell you that. So I have said before, a simple answer, Teddy. Nothing has changed in that regard. I have great respect for the city manager. So, and I've said before, if we go back into a couple of years ago when I was first named superintendent, the city manager would call me up and check in on how I'm doing and offer to help with anything, right? And you need something, and I wouldn't need anything. And then the next day I would. I'd need help with finances, and Connor Baldwin would help me out. And Tom Golden, the city manager, made all the resources available to me that I might need for support in my first days and weeks as superintendent of schools. That wasn't for some nefarious benefit or some particular reason that Tom Golden had to get something out of the schools or something. That was genuinely because he cares about the city.
Well, did they charge you for maintenance of effort for those phone calls and not access to Connor Baldwin?
I should double check that. Right? I
You
double
want to check that line item?
My point is that I believe that Tom Golden is genuine and that he genuinely supports me and the school department. And so that's one aspect of it. Another aspect of it is if we look at what's happening in the city and what the manager and the administration are doing, I'm also a Lowell resident. There's a lot happening, and there's a lot on his plate, right? We want to bring more businesses into the city and grow our tax base. We want to develop the various areas, the Link project and so on, and we want the potholes fixed, and we want better health care. And by the way, don't raise my taxes, right? So I am very respectful of the city manager and what he's doing, and sympathetic as well, right? And I have a great rapport with him. However, and this is the tricky part that people sometimes don't understand, if you work really well with someone, you should be able to have a disagreement with them. And so when I'm working on a team at central office, and I've done this in schools as well, there's some resources I go to. There's books, and there's one book called The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. And one of them, a key one, is fear of conflict. On any team that you get, people are nice to each other and work nice. In the best, highest functioning teams, people are not afraid to have conflict. Well, Tom Golden and Liam Skinner are able to be real with each other and able to tell each other, you're wrong on this one. We need this. You got to give in on that. So that's part of it. Obviously, I'm angling for more funding for the school department. The city manager has different ideas on that. We haven't finished our conversations on it, but we are still having conversations on it.
Okay, so you accurately described how it has to work, and I've often said that to people. We kind of seeing it with the whole UMass Lowell and Conference Center, and what the city council wants, and what the university wants, and what the state want. Sometimes Right. 95% of the time they're in unison, same goal. But sometimes you have to butt heads, and it is the job of President Marty Meehan and Chancellor Julie Chen to do what's in the best interest of the university. It is the job of Manager Golden and the City Council to do what's in the best interest of the city as a whole and its residents. And it is your job and the school committee's job to do what's in the best interest of the school department. I get all that. But I feel like we're at a point where there's loggerheads now. And there's a lot of stuff going back and forth. And, some folks, I've had folks on both sides tell me the lies are everywhere. So I want to kind of get through to what is real and what is not real. And first, the most recent developments. Last night, school committee budget meeting. I didn't see it, but I was told 2 significant things happened. One, the schools actually added on top of what you had already been asking for, which was a dispute with, it wasn't balancing with what the city is going to give you, the city and the state, or had proposed to give you. More money was added onto the budget. Is that accurate?
In some respects, it is accurate. Last night at the school committee meeting, I want to get it in the right context. In the school department, we're making significant cuts. We are at least $4 million short of where we thought we should be, and I would argue very much more short than that. So we're working within the figure that we have, which includes the $10 million from the city and no more, which includes the Chapter 70 money from the state and no more. We are in the process right now, working with the school committee, of deciding, well then, which positions are we cutting? What services are we cutting? The school department, my office, has given a set of recommendations. The school committee is parsing them out and working through them, as is their job. During the meeting last night, the school committee agreed to, yes, we'll go ahead with these cuts. Some others, they said, let's hold back and let's talk about that some more. And there were 2 positions that were added back at the wish of the school committee. When we made that move last night, when you add something back, you need to take something else off. And so we were aware of that and we discussed that. However, I didn't rewatch the tape, but somewhere along the line, we became distracted by another question, by another issue, and we moved on to another line in the budget, and we failed to take something away for something we added. So it's an error, and it's going to be fixed.
So it wasn't the intent to add even more when you're being told you're going to end up getting less. It was just a procedural oversight that you're aware of and will be rectified.
Correct.
So taxpayers don't need to get all verklempt about that.
I tell you, Teddy, if it was a tactic, if it was deliberate, it would have been a lot more than just the right. But no,
I was going to say you shot too low.
No, we're going to work within the figures that we have today. If
271 is that number. Give 271. So
271, and that's the number today.
That's the number.
After my next conversation with the city manager, and after the Senate works its play, we're going to way up there. Yeah.
One other interesting thing happened that I look at as a political faux pas by the school committee last night. I'm not sure the votes are there on the city council to give you anything more than what maybe there's talk about another $2 million coming from the state. So that closes the $4 million gap that you expected down to $2 million. Whether that happens or not, who knows? But there's one voice on the city council that has been, through this whole process, has been saying, I'm going to paraphrase Councillor Eric Gitch here. I don't care what it takes. I don't care where you have to get it from. Give the schools their money. Give the schools their $4 million extra that they were expecting. That's how I would characterize what he's saying. He's talked about, free cash. He's talked about if you have to take it from some other department, whatever, give the schools the $4 million. And last night, the school committee voted against the joint facilities department, which has been one of the pet proposals, pet themes of Councillor Gitcher's entire tenure on the city council. Was it a wise political move to give your most vociferous advocate to shoot down something that he has been hoping for forever?
I don't think that will be a concern long term. Okay. Teddy, there's several things that let me correct you.
Okay, good.
Correct the record. Go back and watch the tape of the school city council meetings. I spoke at the city council not this week, but last week, and each school council member, to a person, with excepting the mayor who was running that meeting and Councillor Dakota, who was not at that meeting. The rest of the city councillors spoke and asked the city manager to restore our budget. So Eric Gitcher spoke up, and I'm thankful that he did. But each of the other members followed his lead and said, sit down with the superintendent and work this out. So there's a lot of support in the city council for restoring the school department budget.
There was, and yet, as that meeting progressed and the manager was asked, what will it mean to the budget if we give those $4 million to the school? It meant either another 1.8% tax increase or more, brings us to about 4.5% as opposed to the 2.5% that the manager has in his proposed budget. And I got the sense suddenly the appetite seemed to wane. And sure enough, last Tuesday night, the city council, there was, Councillor Corey Robinson, it to some degree was basically questioning, like, well, even if the money falls out of the sky this year, what are you going to do next year? Almost like questioning whether there's a structural deficit there. And when you put it to, it's easy to say, yeah, just give the schools are important, education is important. I don't think you're going to find a person who's going to say opposite of that. when you say, well, okay, are you now willing to pay a 4.5% tax increase instead of 2.5%? Or are you ready to cut police, fire, DPW, parks, water department, whatever? Now that this is where the conversation gets interesting. And this is where I'm not sure the schools have the support that they had at the beginning of this council discussion. Are you confident you still have that support?
Teddy, let's take a look at the proposed city budget. Let's take a look at that.
All right, let's do it.
And let's lay it out here, a big spreadsheet, and let's go through and have the superintendent of schools make some suggestions about how the city could restore the $4 million cash for the schools. This isn't going to happen. Of course it's not, right? But there are 100 ways to restore the cash. You could ask me, you're going to have to live with this $4 million cut, Mr. Superintendent, right? What would you do if it was a $10 million cut? Well, I'd make some other choices. Every time you do budgeting, whether you're adding or subtracting, you are making choices. You're making choices. We get additional funds and we're going to add certain positions or add certain services. We are going to have to make a choice which ones to add, which ones to subtract, right? That's what's happening right now, and that's what's happening on the city side. It's what the city administration should be doing. They're working with the money that they've got on hand, and they're making choices about how to spend it. You can spend it differently if they chose to, and that's what I'm advocating for.
Okay.
It does not necessitate a tax increase.
All right. So let's kind of get the numbers where they are today. It is the way I'm reading it, the combined, the city and the state are providing $271 million for the schools to use.
Correct.
You created a budget of, is it 275 million based on anticipating another 4 million from the city? They gave you 14 million in cash along with a maintenance of effort in 2024 or fiscal year 2025, however it goes, but they're only giving you 10 now. So, but is your budget that you originally wanted to propose $275 million?
So you can say that. So we don't propose the budget until it's the time, right? So we never proposed a budget that was higher than what we received.
But you worked on one.
Exactly.
Right? Okay.
So you work on one during the spring. You're working and say, what are we going to get in Chapter 70 this year? What's it look like that the state is going to do? And then what we don't know at that moment what the city is going to do. But the city cash last year was $14 million, and that is a very low proportion of the city's obligation to the schools. So it was a conservative number to work with going forward for this year. So yes, we budgeted based on 14 million. And when I say a proportion, in the past, the cash proportion to the schools has been about 30%, 33% of net school spending. In the last 3 years alone, just the last 3 years, it had been reduced to only 22%. The money we received from the city was only 22% cash compared to what the city was obligated to give. So it was a very conservative number for us to start with, and it was a surprise to find out that the city is intending to give us even less than 22%, only 14.5% this coming year in cash. That's a shocker.
Okay. And yet, that's not the only money that comes from the city. There is something known as maintenance of effort.
That's right.
Which you talked about. And you talked about how the state, DESE, sets a number.
That's right.
The school has to meet a minimum net school spending.
The city has to meet.
The city, I should say. I apologize. Has the city met and or exceeded that number in the past 3 years and in this upcoming budget? Are they exceeding the number they are required? Because there's some folks out there, the social media keyboard warriors, who are saying the city is not meeting its obligation. Is the city meeting what it's obligated to do, whether it's cash or net school spending / maintenance of effort?
Have you been doing your exercise, Teddy? Did you get your steps in yesterday?
No.
How are you doing for the last week, right?
Are you looking at me here?
Right, so let's say you're saying, oh yeah, I'm doing all my steps, I'm getting all my, but we could scrutinize that a little bit further. So the city is meeting maintenance of effort in its accounts and so on, but the school committee also believes at this time that it warrants some additional scrutiny. And so there could be, so anytime you're looking at a budget, whether it be the cash or maintenance of everything, you can take a good deep dive and see if we can find efficiencies and so on. And so I think that's worth looking at as well.
All right. Well, thank you for going there, because that was, are you looking at my list here?
No, I haven't done that.
That was one of my follow-ups. There is an insinuation that the city has been cooking the books. They've been padding that maintenance of effort, perhaps charging you for 4 hours of labor for somebody to come over and fix something rather than 3 hours of labor. Cooking the books is the nice way to say it. Financial fraud is what it actually is, because the city has to have that number certified by the state. They also have to present that number to you, don't they?
Yes.
Okay. So you obviously you haven't seen, I'm going to guess you haven't seen the last year's maintenance of effort, but you've seen the others. Do you believe, are you approaching this, the fact that the city's padding those numbers and cooking the books?
It's very concerning that people should even be talking about it, Teddy. And so I have no evidence of that right now today. I think on behalf of the city, on behalf of the manager and the CFO, who have been really good partners to me, I would imagine, given that talk, that they're going to welcome a scrutiny of maintenance of effort to put this thing to bed.
I have asked to see those numbers as well. So I'm
Sure.
hoping that I get them, because that's a huge distinction. If what some people are insinuating is true, it's not padding. That's fraud, because you're submitting signed documents to the state for review, and obviously you folks have had a chance to look at it as well.
I believe that there's always, as I said, that you can look for at documents and so on and find efficiencies. I'm not expecting any fraud. I've never expected that we can disagree and have wonderful conflicts, about our ideas and about what we need and want. There's been nothing but proper and professional work I've seen from the city's administration.
All right. So, I want to get into the nitty gritty of what that 271 million or 275 million would get us.
Okay, I'm supposed to listen to that, right? I want to divert you for a moment.
Okay.
We can go back to before we go into the nitty gritty. Let's broaden it out for a minute, if you don't mind, because we're doing this thing that we do in Lowell quite well, which is we get right into it and we argue about the local politics and so on, right?
That's why an Inside Lowell exists.
Okay.
It's just, this is the perfect discussion.
So let me tell you a story. It's maybe not as fun as the story that you want, but I told this to the school committee last night. It's a true story. I told a different story, by the way, to the city council. Different story. About 20 years ago, a reporter from the Boston Globe compared the library in my middle school, the Daly Middle School in Lowell, with the library in Wellesley, and it wasn't a pretty comparison. And in a sense, it was shaming our library, and because it was so poorly resourced by comparing with the library in Wellesley. And I told that to the city council because I said, do you know what we did shortly after we were shamed for our library? You'd think we would have, gone out in the streets and paraded and argued and so on and found the funds to re-up the library. What we did was we cut the librarians. We had a budget issue and we cut all the librarians from the schools. And that's never been fixed, never 20 years later. Okay. So this different story that I told about Wellesley last night was this. Around about the same time, we were also invited to visit that school in Wellesley, Wellesley Middle School, about the same size as the Daly Middle School that I was running at the time. And I went down there with my staff to visit, and we went to see this program. I don't remember what the program was because we were so distracted by all the resources they had at Wellesley Middle School. So just a few details, right? There was an assistant principal for each grade level. There were curriculum coordinators, there were department chairs. It was almost like the structure at Lowell High School, but in a middle school. We have none of those positions in Lowell. I'm not looking for them, by the way, but I'm just making a point here. They had 7 clerks in that school and 6 guidance counselors. In my middle school, comparable size, 1 clerk, 1 guidance counselor. So I was out of my league. I said to the principal, what? You got 7 clerks? What do you do with 7 clerks? And he counted it off in no time flat. 1 clerk for each of the assistant principals, 1 clerk for himself, a confidential clerk, an office clerk, a guidance clerk. Before you know it, he counted for them all, right? The point, though, is this. In other communities, if we compare with Wellesley, How do you think we fare in terms of the needs of our community that we need to serve in school, and the work required, the effort required to bring students up to an educational standard? Is that easier or harder in Lowell versus Wellesley? Where are the resources, Teddy? We're way off. We're way off. We're not close. We can argue about the $270 million, and yes, we're going to argue with the city about additional cash. But truly, the picture is much bigger than that. Much bigger than that. We're way behind.
Lowell with Wellesley? Why not compare two totally
Let's
different
do it.
communities? Let's do Cambridge. Let's do Somerville.
Let's do it.
What are those numbers?
Well, I'll tell you what. I don't have all the numbers to hand, but I have good news for you. The state is doing it for us.
Okay.
And the state is doing it for us, and they've looked at that, and they've recognized the disparities, and they've recognized that we are not near where we need to be in districts like Lowell, and that's why they introduced the Student Opportunity Act, to give additional funding to school districts like Lowell, gateway cities, to try to get us more evenly matched up with other communities. We're never, ever, we're not even looking to shoot for what they have in Wellesley, right? But we're looking to even the playing field a little bit and to provide resources, Teddy, for the most needy students in our community. 10% homeless students in our schools. 20% special education students in our schools.
But that's a different discussion to have.
30% of students in our schools are ELs. They're learning English as they're learning math, as they're learning science, right? What does it take to service those students? What does it take to truly have the resources to provide for their needs? We're way off. But what we'll do this Lowell thing. We'll get into the nitty gritty of the manager and the superintendent and $4 million and additional cuts, and whether they should be a central office or whether they should be in the schools and all of that, right? But we lose the context that our schools are not funded appropriately.
Okay. We're going to get into some of that funding with Superintendent Liam Skinner. You're tuned into the Daily Pulse here on this, I almost lost track of my date there, Thursday, May 22nd, 2025. The Daily Pulse, the show where we keep our finger on the pulse of everything happening in the city of Lowell and the world around it. We thank our sponsors for helping to make that possible. Ray Booten, a licensed realtor in Massachusetts and New Hampshire. Find him online, realestaterayBooten.com. Thanks as well to our friends at WellPoint. We're here in the WellPoint studios, and at WellPoint, your whole health is their whole point. Thanks as well to Washington Savings Bank, banking that goes the extra mile. Make the switch now to Washington Savings Bank. TMI Properties, quality and value at every price point. Find your perfect space with TMI. Mahoney Oil, providing warmth and protection to Greater Lowell and Southern New Hampshire since 1925. The Greater Lowell Community Foundation, improving the quality of life in our communities through strategic, impactful philanthropy. Francis E. Prevention Insurance, the agency you can count on to protect your most valuable assets. And by the Massachusetts Pirates. They bring all the hard-hitting action and excitement of arena football to the Mill City. Next Thursday night, Pirates' next game, and it is at home at the Tsongas Center. All right, so 271, the city wants to give or have the school department total budget be, which counts state money and everything coming in. You had created a budget based on about 275. In that 275, I'm hearing that there were cuts or there are new jobs that are being created. That what accounts for that? What accounts for that difference? Are there new jobs being created at the same time that you're saying that you have to make cuts?
I think the answer to your question, Teddy, is absolutely not. But it needs explaining, right? I've said this at City Council as well, there are a lot of fallacies, but I don't mind the questions. I appreciate the questions because you have an opportunity to clarify. But when people talk and there's bad blood and people sort of pit the city against the schools, which is a false argument, then we run into these problems where we have fallacies and we have conspiracies and all the rest, right? When we were working towards 14 million city cash towards the schools, when we started that budgeting, we already, with that amount of money, were making some cuts. We were deliberately restricting those cuts to only central office, not in schools. Why do we have to make cuts if we're getting that much more money, up to $275 million? Because health insurance costs are going way up. Transportation costs are going through the roof. Transportation costs are going up somewhere between 6 and 7%, I believe. in the cost for transportation, but we're also needing more of it. More homeless students being transported, more kids in various programs being transported here, there, and everywhere. So our costs have increased to such an extent that even with approximately 7.5% increase in our funding, we needed to make some cuts at central office.
All right. Well, thank you for confirming that number. I did my math. The state's giving you 18 million more. That's 7.5% of your budget from what they gave last year. Take away the 4% from the city, you're seeing an increase of about 5.5%. And folks would ask, I would ask, I get all the costs. Everybody's costs are going up. The private citizen isn't seeing a 5.5% increase in his or her budget or their family's budget. The Lowell schools can't work within a 5.5% increase?
We're going to work, Teddy. We're going to work within whatever money we have. This conversation we're having today about a reduced budget for the school department could be potentially a lot different this time next year. And I don't mean because we'll have all the money back that we want to work with. It might be a lot worse. It could be a lot worse, right? We'll deal with that when we get to that. What we're dealing with right now is a cut that we're dealing with. We're making the cuts needed to stay within budget. We don't like it. We believe our schools, we believe our students deserve a lot more than to cut the services that we're giving to them. We haven't even gotten into what some other needs are. I use with the school committee and with the city council a couple of examples that are, I think, key examples, like preschool services and like summer school, right? I'm stuck on Wellesley right now. If you're a Wellesley school student and you finish for the summer and you don't go back to school until the end of August, what do you do during the summer? Well, you probably travel around the world with mommy and daddy. You probably read books and so on and so forth. For this population of students that we have in Lowell, they don't have those resources. They don't have those experiences. So we need to provide summer school services, and we don't have enough funds to provide really robust summer school services. So we deal with what's called summer learning loss, right? The funding isn't there to do the kinds of things that we need to do for our community.
But Wellesley, you don't even have to use Wellesley. I've been at Chamber of Commerce municipal breakfast where town managers from Chelmsford, Westford, Drake, Tewksbury are bemoaning the fact that the city of Lowell gets anything they want from the state. You're getting $261 million.
Right.
Lowell Public Schools are getting $261 million from the state. My assumption is because of everything you just talked about, you need to do summer programs. In Wellesley, they don't. In Tewksbury, they may not need to or whatever. So that's the trade-off. The state comes in and funds a significantly larger portion of your budget than other communities like a Wellesley. So in the end, it's a wash.
It's not a wash.
Not?
Oh my goodness, Teddy. This is where we're so far off, right? This is we're so if we could put together a plan for summer school like I'm talking about that would cost $5 million, we could easily spend $10 million in building out Liam Skinner's dream summer school. We're not talking about that, right? We're talking this year about trying to find less than $1 million to run summer school that is a minimal summer school for students who are failing ELA and math. It doesn't involve lots of other enrichments that we'd like to offer our students through the summer. It's minimal. And it's so necessary, right? But you want to argue that you're getting $261 million from the state. What's your problem, right? Because that's not enough. It's nowhere near enough, right, to do the kinds of things that we ought to be doing for our students in our community. And I'm not just saying it Pollyanna, like, oh, the superintendent wants to provide all these, wonderful experiences for students, get them to fly around the world. No such thing. Basic services like a proper summer school program, like increasing our preschool services so that when our students get to be in third grade, that they're reading at grade level because they got the right start in life and in education from preschool. We service less than a third of the preschool students we could be serving in the city of Lowell. Less than a third. Districts like Salem, for example, Massachusetts, has worked very hard to increase their preschool services. They know that that's the key to getting students to really succeed. The payoff for that won't be seen for years and years and years. When you have, for example, high school dropouts and kids that don't succeed in our education system, that becomes very noticeable during high school years. the genesis of that and how to get at that and fix it and not have that be a problem is down in preschool. Start working with kids at a younger age. Districts and communities that get that are investing to fix that issue by bolstering preschool. The state is looking for it. Smart communities are figuring out how to get it done. We're not even having that conversation in Lowell because we're having a conversation about how you're spending $261 million. We're way off.
But in Lowell, you've got a number of other agencies that are also doing a lot of this stuff, are they not?
We have terrific agencies in Lowell that are doing a lot.
As they're called.
Partners, fine. Community partners. They're doing great work. We have a lot of providers who are providing early childhood services, Acre Family Daycare, to name just one of our largest. We think they're terrific, right? But they're not per se an educational institution. They're going to, students who go to Acre Family Daycare or any number of other partners that are doing that work will come into our schools, and those students will be better off than students who had no daycare, no services at all. But they won't be the same as students who were through a preschool program and an early childhood program run by Lowell Public Schools, where they learned something and they were deliberately developed and given the skills and the attitudes and the ability to walk into a kindergarten class and be ready to succeed. Many of our students show up in kindergarten class and they're anything but ready to succeed. They haven't been socialized. They haven't got the skills necessary to pay attention to what the teacher's saying. We need to address that at an earlier age. We need to increase our preschool services.
Right. That's a point that's been made to me. So these other agencies can do what Lowell Public Schools or public school in general can do far more efficiently, far more cost effectively.
Do they have certified teachers?
No, well,
Do they have certified teachers?
That's what I want to ask.
Do they have curriculum? Do they know what they're doing? Right?
I don't know any of that.
Right. You don't know that. I can tell. Right.
So you said something that was interesting, though. You said that if they come into Lowell Public Schools, they're certainly in better shape than a kid who wasn't in some kind of a preschool.
Sure.
But they are not as advanced as those who've gone through the Lowell Public Schools preschool programs, summer programs, whatever they are. That's
sure.
That's a fact. You said that.
Absolutely.
Okay.
So it stands to reason.
That's an important distinction.
But think about this, right? If you have students who show up in kindergarten class, never having been around other kids, never having had to follow a direction, and this happens, then kindergarten classes, it's probably the most difficult group to teach to begin with, right? But students are just not accustomed to being in that environment. If they've been to a preschool program, let's say with CTI or Acre Family Daycare, right? Those students are at least used to being with other kids, and they're socialized to that environment. They're at least used to listening to another adult who's not their parent and following directions. That's very useful. But it doesn't mean that they've learned their ABCs. It doesn't mean that they've learned curriculum that we think would be valuable for them entering school.
Okay. Important point. I wanted to kind of make sure we hone in.
How much is that worth, Teddy? Are you going to give me another $100 million to do that? Or are we going to argue about a couple of $1 million for central office versus schools or some other small detail?
Let's argue about that extra stuff, because I want to give you another point that's a bone of contention with a lot of folks and has been with me. And I did this math exercise yesterday when I had former headmaster, former Mayor Bill Samaras on, and City Councilor Corey Belanger. And of course I did a math exercise, and my math was completely off. I started with the wrong number. I was going with the assumption that it was $171 million, even though I knew it was really 271. But so the school department budget is $271 million that the city is put out there for you now. I was going under the assumption that 75% of that is payroll. I actually looked at your budget book, and it looks like it's closer to 80.2 or 80.3%. But we'll call it 80%. Is that accurate?
I do not trust your math, Debbie. But I'll tell you what, that you're doing a great job of going from the big picture right down into nitty gritty, right down into small stuff, as if that matters as much as what we really need. Let's do it, right? The vast majority of the school department budget, as is appropriate, as is understandable, goes towards salaries and
which by the way, any organization, I think 70%, that's a fair number, 75 to 80% of any organization is payroll when you add in benefits, insurance, etc. That's, I think in the private sector, you get a lot of that, and
sure.
That's understandable. That's not unusual. Here's my bone of contention, and here's what a lot of people have said. If 80% of your payroll, 80% of your budget is payroll, then your budget, then your payroll budget is, let me do it so I can have the exact numbers right in front of me. $271 million.
Teddy doing homework on the fly, huh?
$216,800,000 is about the payroll for the Lowell Public Schools that you have to fund out of that budget. Am I close at least?
No.
216 million?
No.
How much am I way off?
I'm not doing, Teddy, it's okay for you to do what you did on your calculator and to do some spitballing right on the fly and so that those numbers are not accurate, and I couldn't give you accurate numbers
Are they too high
with
or
that.
too low?
In all likelihood, I'm guessing that payroll and benefits is more than 80%, probably significantly more than 80%. The other expenses that we have are things like transportation. That's not payroll, right? But other than that,
but you don't control the payroll for that. That's you have certain things that are contracted out, such as busing and whatever, but you're not directly paying the salary of those people and the health benefits.
right? Sure.
So for my exercise, the point was that in the last round of budget negotiations, pretty much every employee in the city of Lowell got a 9% increase over 3 years. The Lowell Public Schools union employees received an 11% increase. They got 2% more money than every other worker in the city of Lowell, which if you take $216,800,000, my number, not yours, and multiply by 2%, you get $4.336 million.
Teddy, I didn't give you any numbers.
You could have lived within that $10 million budget had the school department simply towed the line a little bit better during contract negotiations with the teachers' unions. Fair or unfair?
Wrong, very wrong. You said your number's not mine. I didn't give you any numbers, so how did you come up with that one, right? So Teddy, you've used erroneous numbers. Your own homework, which is fine. I don't mind you trying that out, but that's not accurate. I'm not going to vouch for that. But then you went and used that to make an argument comparing apples and oranges, right? Should everybody in the city of Lowell receive the same salary increments when raises are being doled out? Should they? Should
same salary or same percentage increase?
The same percentage increase.
Yes, 100%.
Well,
what's fair for police and fire, I believe, should be fair for teachers.
I completely disagree with that. I think police and fire should absolutely receive fair increases and percentages and so on. But that's different from school department workers. The police and the fire are probably different from each other, right? Teachers are professionals, Teddy, that oftentimes are not treated as professionals. Teachers are professionals that we ought to honor. They work hard. They go to school and get degrees. They get their undergraduate degrees, and they go back and they get their master's degrees, and then they continue to take coursework to keep up with the latest in what they do. And they're professionals. It's a different ball game. You're comparing apples and oranges. Yes, the teachers in Lowell, with their strong teachers union, negotiated for raises for the next 3 years. They did a good job with that. But we and the school committee did not simply hand over money to them. We argued and we worked to restrict and to make it within reasonable guidelines. When we did so, by the way, we ended up having to use a mediator, a state mediator, who told us in no uncertain terms what was reasonable, who told us and made us look at strikes in other districts, teacher strikes and so on. And so,
So you were kind of blackmailed by the threat of an illegal strike, which was what Bahu said here.
We were advised by a state auditor around what was reasonable and what was fair. And I believe that's what the union held out for, and that's what they got. There's nothing about that whatsoever. Nothing about that plays into the discussion about the budget this year. Yes, it means that there are more expenses. Of course it does, but they are reasonable. So
there's a dollar figure attached to that, whether it's my 4.33 million or whatever that number is. It's significant, is it not?
Yeah.
Are we talking millions of dollars?
When you talk about, I'm going to say, the teaching profession and treating it as such, and comparing it to doctors and comparing it to lawyers and comparing to other professions, the teachers are relatively lowly paid by compared to other professions. They absolutely deserve what they're receiving in Lowell, and it's comparable with local districts. It's not ahead of everybody else. But on that point, we have got to, for the benefit of our schools and the benefit of our community, we have got to provide our teachers a comparable or a competitive wage with other districts. We're talking about a school district that has all of these needs in it and these students that have so many needs in it. It's a really challenging job in Lowell. And so we have to give our teachers a comparable, a competitive wage so that we can attract more of them.
I'm not going to argue that it's a difficult job. And in the perfect world, they get paid everything that they can get. Doctors and lawyers aren't funded by the taxpayers. Teachers are, as are parks workers and whatnot. So there's some, when you go into the teaching profession, you understand certain things. And I think teachers' pay today, as opposed to 20, 30 years ago, has significantly escalated in Lowell and other communities, far more than the average job, I would say. Is that?
No, Teddy, show me your numbers. You're spouting off ideas and notions that the teachers' pay has gone up. Of course it has. When you go to buy a car tomorrow, right? Is it going to cost roughly the same amounts it did 20 years ago?
No.
Take a look. Inflation and increases all the way, right? Yeah. Look back, but you want to go back in history and say that, well, the teachers have paid more now than they were in the past. Comparatively, show me your numbers, right? Teachers are doing professional work that should be honored and respected, and is very much so in other places. You want to make that different because they're public employees. That's fair, right? Because we have to work with different rules. But the teachers in Lowell are being paid fairly. They're not being paid above what they should be paid.
Has the average worker, do you believe the average worker has gotten 11% increase over the last 3 years, is guaranteed an 11% increase in the private sector?
Teddy, we're back to
because that's most of your taxpayers.
You're back to talking about numbers that you're not presenting anything to me to work with. But I don't know. I am not responsible for the average workers. I'm responsible for the school department, and I know what's valuable in the school department. Nothing more so than our teachers. The teachers need to be paid a competitive wage, and that's what's happening. That is not the source of a budget problem where we've been reduced to a historic low in city cash coming to the school department. Don't put that on the back of teachers that are doing heroic work every day on behalf of needy kids in our community.
Well, the cash figure, historically low. The maintenance of effort figure, whatever that number is, supposedly historically high. So one way or another, the money is going to schools or whatever. Now, could the city cut the maintenance of effort and then give you $4 million cash? I guess so, but haven't we spent a significant amount of time complaining about the condition of the buildings and whatnot? And aren't resources going into those?
Teddy, I'll offer you once again, we'll put out the city budget on this big spreadsheet right in front of us here, and we'll find $4 million in there. We'll find
I think I just did.
We'll make some different choices, right? And we'll help the city manager to find it.
Okay. Well, but so that's the point of view. A lot of people, like, if the school department continuously gives in and gives more than maybe they could get away with negotiating. Now, maybe the Lowell teachers would have walked out and gone on strike, which, by the way, is illegal. But then it becomes a completely different political battle in the city.
Didn't stop them in Newton.
No, it didn't.
Right.
It didn't. But I mean, if it starts to happen in a community like Lowell, now we gotta, now mommy and daddy in Newton can probably afford the 8 to 2 a.m. daycare.
Yeah. If the teachers received a fair raise, a competitive raise that was what they deserved, but also that what was in the best interests of Lowell, what was in the best interest of Lowell Public Schools in our community. The teachers in Lowell, Teddy, are not overpaid. You're missing the point. You're missing the big picture. You want to take all the things that we need in our schools and drag it down to, look at the raises the teachers got. Of course.
Because they're different than what everybody else got.
Of course.
Right on down to sick leave buyback, which I am told all the other unions gave back, this massive accumulation where you can accumulate hundreds of days of sick leave buyback and then get it at the end. And I'm told everybody gave it up. I'm told school administrators gave that up.
They did.
But the teachers' unions did not.
They did. That's correct.
Again, is the school department negotiating as strongly as they could?
Yes.
For the taxpayers?
Yes. Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. But the sick leave buyback, I know it's a sore point. I've given it up. The administrators have given it up, and I believe it is expensive and overburdening on the city. Yes, but the teachers' union has that benefit in their contract, and it's an issue for negotiation. If you want to negotiate that out, you're going to have to pay the teachers more.
You're
right?
gonna have to give, that's what a negotiation is.
Correct.
Okay. Well,
We agree, Teddy. We agree, huh?
Hopefully the next, and again, Paul George's job, the job of the United Teachers of Lowell isn't to save the Lowell taxpayers' money. It is to do the best they can for their members.
Of course.
When it butts heads, I want my city councilors, and I would like the school department, school committee to do the exact same thing. And I just feel like
that's what's happening.
Rolling over. But okay.
Now, Teddy, you're missing again wrong assumptions that are made based on not being involved in negotiations. The school committee did not roll over. They were very firm. They worked very hard over many, many long nights both with the union and with the mediator to get to the point that we got to, which was a fair outcome in the end, right? Again, you can sort of make news from this, right? And we can, but it is not what you think it is. It is not a rolling over.
All right, I'm optimistic you and Manager Golden will iron out your differences easier than you and I will iron.
Well, I'm going to get together with him today, and I'm going to invite you along, Teddy, to help me advocate for the schools. You want to do that? You want to help me advocate for $4 million to restore?
Advocate for the taxpayers.
Yeah.
So
you should advocate for the taxpayers. Most of those taxpayers in Lowell they all deserve to have their kids go to schools where their futures are being decided, where the kids' futures are being decided, and the future of this city is being decided. You cannot, as I told the city council, great things are looking to happen in Lowell. Development projects, wonderful collaboration with the university, and so on. And I'm proud to be a Lowell resident. We can't get to that dreamland in the future without the schools coming with us, Teddy, because the schools are the engines of the community. We're going to produce for this district and this community students that have the right attitudes and skills and knowledge to be successful in the future, which is going to be good for them and good for our city. And it's going to lower things like crime. We need to support public schools, Teddy. Join me in the fight. Come meet the city manager. Let's do some advocacy.
I support the schools. I believe the schools are actually doing everything you said. I believe that a child with the proper support at home and is able to flourish in the Lowell schools, whether that child starts off without knowing a single word of English, as I was, but I went to private school for K through 6. That was my transition. But I believe that a Lowell school child not dealing with some of society's ills that are out there that hamstring entire communities has every opportunity to go from preschool to a doctorate and never leave the city of Lowell schools.
Wonderful.
I think I think this is part of the problem. I think we're under the mistaken impression that if you throw enough money at a societal ill, you're going to solve that problem. And some of the shortcomings that we're dealing with, as you talked about, kids unable to read to level in 3rd grade, kids not showing up in preschool. I think part of that has to do with some societal ills that I doubt you will solve. I doubt Tom Golden will solve. I'm not sure.
No, but
President
Teddy,
of the United States
for a short while, I thought you had some hope there, right? And we were getting to a good point, but you tapered off to a point of saying, you're absolutely right, by the way. You can't just throw money at problems. You have to think about it, and you have to follow the research and be reasoned in what you do, okay? But if you don't do that work, that hard work of figuring out what the community needs, and then, yes, giving the resources to make that happen. What is your solution for those societal ills? Just let the students wilt and fail? Let them become high school dropouts? What will they turn to except crime, right? So
try something different. I would
let's do that.
Not just throw money at
Teddy,
something.
Let's try something different. Let's try something different. Let's do it. Let's give them preschool services from a young age. It's not just trying something different. And then, by the way, how do you think we should pay for that?
Well, you have to pay for it, but
terrific!
But there's only so much money now, so that's why you get paid the big bucks. You have to figure it out.
That's why
I can advise you if you.
That's why that's why, Teddy, I am going to deputize you.
Okay.
To advocate for Lowell Public Schools with each of your guests and with City Hall.
Now we're making progress. Now now we'll talk for the students because it's always about the students, but I lived through a period where nobody cared that the students were, staying out of schools, and well, people
Right.
cared, but boy, did a lot of people not fight for those students to be in a school, and when they were in that school, to not have to be masked up like a,
Right.
like a person in the movie Outbreak. Okay, one other thing that I want that I'd like to have clarified. A lot of talk about charter schools. City, no choice of theirs either, has had to increase what they're giving to charter schools. And there's this argument that, well, and Councillor Dakota asked it the other night, if a student leaves a charter school after October 1st, the money stays in that charter school, as opposed to following that student to the Lowell Public Schools. Ditto with vocational schools, correct? How many of those instances are there a year? 10, 30, 130? What's that number? How many students? Are we talking dozens or hundreds?
I don't know. Probably not hundreds, maybe dozens. I don't know. Again, I want you to think big picture here, Teddy. I'm going to broaden your mind for just a moment. What Councillor Dakota brought up is a really important point. The student that leaves the charter school and comes to Lowell Public Schools on November 1st, the Lowell Public Schools gets no reimbursement. The reimbursement goes to the charter school. That's a problem. And maybe it's dozens of kids of that sort. That's a problem. But there's a bigger problem. And the bigger problem is that the charter schools can do that. The bigger problem is we need to support public education, because in public education, if the child is dismissed from the charter school or sent away from the vocational school, Lowell Public Schools takes them in with open arms and brings them into our classrooms to educate that child. In other words, we're not selective. We can't be selective. Right. That's right. Charter schools can be. Vocational schools can be. That is not fair. It's an unfair. It's an unfair playing field. Right?
This is the number. This is the argument that I've heard forever, and it's used an awful lot from the United Teachers of Lowell, President Paul George's multiple radio interviews. We talked about this, but I think that number is important, and I'll tell you why from a layperson's thing, and you can tell me why I'm wrong. But if 36 students have $15,000 a year to educate a student, we're told, well, that's an extra $500,000 plus that the charter schools / voc schools are getting that should follow the student to the Lowell Public Schools. When it worked the other way, when the student population in Lowell was dropping and 30 students left schools, or in the case of Lowell High School, 750 to 1,000 students left schools, how come nobody advocated for that money to...
Well, I don't.
How come nobody advocated for the savings there? So if 30 students leave a charter school, 36 students, 3 dozen or whatever, we make it 50. If they leave and disperse through K through 12 in the Lowell public school systems, why do your costs go up? I mean, you need more books. I get that.
You need more.
You're not going to hire a new teacher because of those 36 or 50 students.
You are. You don't think you are, but you are. So Lowell Public School, literally for each one student, right? So it's like if you have an airplane flying across the Atlantic Ocean, I'm going home to visit my mother in Ireland, right? And there's an empty seat on that flight. I can go for free because it doesn't cost the airline any more money to fly me. Why should I have to pay? The seat is empty anyway and the plane is going anyway, so why should I have to pay, right? It doesn't work that way. Business doesn't work that way. Schooling doesn't work that way. Sooner or later, the 36 kids that leave the charter school arena, they go into the public schools and they just go into classrooms that have a seat available to them. But at some point, there's a threshold where you have to add more teachers. You have to add more buses. You have to add more curriculum supplies, of course. And that's why the funding is based per student.
So how come it doesn't work the same in the reverse? When 800 students leave Lowell High School, which used to have 4,000 students and now has, 3,200, 3,300? But they were at 2,900 a couple of years ago. How come we didn't see the staff reductions?
You did. Of course you did. Of course you did.
Did?
Of course you did.
How many?
We reduced. I'm trying to think of the term for it, but after school programming, we reduced electives, we reduced courses. The amount of staff at Lowell High School is just what we need to service the students that we have. It's different if we're servicing 3,200 students or 4,000 students. Of course it changed.
Do you have more or less staff members today than you did 10 years ago or 20 years ago when the numbers were a lot lower? And I get that educational requirements require now more paraprofessionals, etc. But in terms of just plain teachers, the classroom teacher, are there less teachers today or more than there were when Lowell High had 4,000 students?
Don't have it in front of me, but I can tell you that what I have in front of me, or what I have in front of my mind, is that Lowell Public Schools' population of students has increased. It's not gone down. So yes, it's possible that Lowell High School has fewer students than it did in the heyday when it had 4,000 students, but it's got less staffing than it did in those days, for sure.
It does.
But it stands to reason. We're not allowing. How would we do that, Teddy? Right? How would we afford that? Is this another? Is this another?
It looks like you can't afford it.
Is this another burgeoning fallacy? Oh, you know, the problem is that Lowell High School has more staff than is needed. That's rubbish. Absolute rubbish.
I think it's a.
How many more? How many more can you come up with? These are nonsense topics, right? Lowell High School has just enough staff to service the amount of students that it has. If we added 200 kids to Lowell High, we'd have to add the staffing. If the students leave the high school, we reduce the staffing. Of course we do. Why would we pay for staff we don't need when we need preschools, when we need summer school programming? That's a sort of the kind of, really, we get into this low level weedy stuff that's nonsense, and it's harmful, Teddy, in the community when we talk about this stuff, when we don't talk about, how do we provide for better summer school programming? Wouldn't it be great if we could get every 3- and 4-year-old into a strong program to help them succeed? Those are conversations to have. Instead, we want to have conversations about, did they reduce the staffing at Lowell High when the students went? Of course they did. But you set that out there like it's, you're a doubting that. See, there's doubt. So let's think about that some more, because maybe that's what's happening. It's nonsense, Eddie. It's nonsense.
I'm going to doubt you. How many, because when I looked, as long as I've known, Lowell High had they'd have 4 different, what do they call them? Houses?
That's correct.
They had a different A house, B house, C. They all had a different leader. When there were 4,000 people, there were still 4,000 students plus in the little schools. There was four houses, right? A, B, C, and D. Now there's 3,000 to 3,200. Can you consolidate there? Has the consolidation happened there? I'm not advocating to lose anybody's job, but this belief that there aren't efficiencies that can be found, I think we can probably find some efficiencies.
Teddy, wait a minute. You are conflating things, and you're making a mess of it, if you don't mind me saying so, right? I am all about efficiencies. I'd love to argue that with you. One of the pillars of our newest strategic plan, which we're just about to unveil, and maybe make that the topic of our next show, which would be much more sensible than this conversation. There's no doubt about it that we could and should and will find efficiencies. Since I've been in central office, it's one of the only things you could put the title of what we're doing down there around finding efficiencies. We've reduced staff. We're finding efficiencies. The high school too. Of course you should find efficiencies. That's got nothing to do with the current staffing at Lowell High School and the structure. Yes, you can take a look at it. We're looking for problems to base a budget issue on. The budget issue right this moment is based on the fact that we're $4 million short in city cash from the city. That's the nub of it. It's not anything else, Teddy. It's not the teacher salaries. It's not the high school staff. It's small thinking. It's not worthy of the community that we should be serving with far more resources than we do.
You're $4 million short in cash. How much extra in maintenance of effort?
So the state has set a level of net school spending for fiscal 26 at $68.9 million.
Is the city exceeding it in their proposal or meeting it?
So if just the numbers would suggest that if the city gave $10 million in cash, then the maintenance of effort would be $58.9 million. It's possible that they exceeded something last year that carries over, so it might be a little bit different than that.
Yeah, last year it was 14 and maybe 54. This year it's 10 and 58.
Right.
Okay. I'm going to give you the last word here. If for some reason you can't work this out, and I am confident that you and Manager Golden will come to some understanding that won't decimate education in Lowell, and I'm gonna bet that the state pops in another couple of million, if not more, albeit may not do it till after July 1st, which creates another timing issue, budgeting. But let's assume the numbers stay as they are. 271 is what you're going to get. when you had planned for 275. What does that mean? How devastating is that? How will the classroom feel it? How will the typical student in the school feel that if that number is not bridged in some way, shape, or form?
That's not something we need to predict, in the sense that that's the budget we've been working on with the school committee in the last couple of meetings, right? And then public hearings that we've had. That we despite the fact that we're advocating for additional funding, we're working right now with the funding that we have. And so the impacts have been shared publicly. The impacts are additional cuts to staff and programs, both the central office and the schools. 53 positions cut from the school department. That's the impact.
What are those positions?
Well, there are a couple of administrative positions at the central office, a couple of clerical positions. Another topic we should come back to, Teddy, probably for another day. Let's do that conversation. I'm wondering how you know that. I'm wondering how central office really ought to be structured in Teddy Panos's view, right? And what your expertise is in that field, right?
Not much.
Not much, I would think, but doesn't.
Other than watching and observing.
Not much, but not much knowledge, but it doesn't prevent you sharing viewpoints, right?
Okay, I'm a superintendent on the podcast, not in real life.
If you heard that if you heard that Lowell General was restructuring its oncology unit, and they're bringing in some specialists for these different, and they're growing this program, what would your mind go to with that?
Well, I'm going to assume that the oncology unit would bring in more.
You would think that
more revenue, because you're providing a treatment and a service.
And I would say, Lowell General's on the move. They are producing, they're building, they're going to add more services for our community. And I would imagine if I questioned why they're doing it, they would have some data behind it to get right. But I wouldn't automatically assume, see, they're increasing their administration, they're just spending more money again. That's what's happening in the school department, Teddy.
I don't know if you're increasing it. I know it's been increased significantly. And that's a nationwide thing. That's not a Lowell thing.
Last school year and this school year, we've reduced funding at central office. And we reduced funding in schools this year as well, right? All of it is unfortunate. We should have that conversation.
Okay. I think we talked about this in one of your visits, but Lowell is different from national trends. But national trends are, in the last 2 decades, the percentage of admins in public schools has increased by over 80%. I believe 87 might be the number, while the percentage of teachers has increased by 8%. That's a bad number. Now, if Lowell is different, bravo to Lowell, but I'm not gonna make the assumption that Lowell hasn't increased its admins. I'm pretty sure it has.
So it may well be the case. So, for example, there are 2 assistant principals in several schools today, where there was only 1 before. That increase in assistant principals is minimal. It's very basic, right? And it'd be typical for us to get into a debate about why they've doubled the number of assistant principals in a school because they went from 1 to 2. But it's one of those small arguments to have. Yeah. Schools
you can make a legitimate case for that. I wouldn't necessarily disagree with you.
But you count it. But you count it. If that's an assistant principal, some people say, well, that's not in the classroom. Actually, in fact, it's a big support, ought to be a huge support for the culture in the school building and what is able to happen in the classroom because of the support that the staff now have, right? But that counts towards what you're talking about. That's an administrative ad,
sure,
right?
But 87 versus 9?
No. I again, Teddy, next time I'm going to press you to show your numbers to me. I don't know where you're coming up with this stuff.
The Department of Education in D.C.
Okay. Well, I am, if nothing, transparent. And I'll bring you, if you care for me to bring you the numbers in Lowell, I'm happy to do that.
You've told me Lowell's numbers are nowhere near that, and I trust.
And they're public documents for us. We produce them for the school committee.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
How confident are you that you'll get that budget that you can live with?
I don't know how to respond to that. I'm confident that I know 100% confident they're going to advocate for our needs. It's possible that the state will give more money. I do believe that the city can and hopefully will contribute more funding, as was advocated by the city councillors. And so we're going to. I don't know how confident to be, but we're going to keep advocating for it.
All right. I appreciate you coming in and passionately advocating. You got more pushback from me than the city council when you, by the way, I texted a few folks and said, that's the best I've ever heard Liam. It was a great speech. I'm not sure I support him 100%, but you were spectacular on the city council floor 2 meetings ago.
Thank you.
Similar today. Well, at least I gave you a little more pushback than the councilors did.
Bring it on, Teddy.
I appreciate you for being here. We'll talk again next month.
Thank you.
All
Take
right.
care. Yeah.
Lowell
Bye-bye.
School Superintendent Liam Skinner, we thank him for joining us. We thank you for joining us as well. I hope you've learned a little something about the budget battle here between the city of Lowell, the city side, and the city of Lowell schools, the school side. Again, I remain very confident. I believe Superintendent Skinner is a reasonable person who is also advocating for the schools as he should. I believe City Manager Golden is a reasonable person and will also do what needs to be done for the city. And ultimately, what's good for the schools is also good for the city to a degree. That's my take. Thank you for joining us tomorrow. We're going to celebrate our 100th episode of the Daily Pulse with the Pod Squad, Mike 𝐃𝐚𝐢𝐥𝐲. You think I'm tough on schools and teachers? Wait till you get a load of Batch. But joining Batch will be Michaela Hondos McCarthy, aka the hyphen. She always defends the teacher. So we'll have a little fun with them. Plus, we'll plan some other stuff for you as well. Till then, everybody stay dry. It is a rainy day out there. It's also a very cold day out there. So please stay warm. As always, stay safe. And I'll catch you on the other side.